that you're afraid you're going to betray it. And if you don't care about it, it's easier.
Yeah.
But it's so meaning to you. I thought perhaps Debussy wrote it for you.
That's so sweet.
Because that's what feels when the performer plays the piece. It becomes yours while you play it. It's an appropriation. It's like my love, my this, my... It's a necessity that we're not just reciting notes written on paper, but it becomes something of our statement. And it's very striking that many times Debussy writes what I call echo cells. It's my little jargon. That is, he restates things right away instead of developing them. How are you? How are you? You well? You well? Me too, me too. When he does the composition teachers would have taught him to develop. Somehow go somewhere. Instead of this, he restates it, literally the same, with a slight difference in the beginning. And then it does. And the bass change, but the same. So one day I was teaching my studio class in Bloomington, and I decided to play for them something by Debussy without these restatements or recallings. And the piece shrunk. Because you go directly from, for instance, and you realize that these restatements are not just redundancies that could appear to us as such, but probably more like terms of endearments, as a way to say something very intimate, special. When you say to somebody, I love you, and you could say, I love you to your favorite dessert, then it doesn't have the same meaning. So you take the time to restate it, but I really love you.
Yeah.
And I think that this, if there were lyrics, it would help. I would like to tell you how much I would like to dance with you tonight under this moonlight. And all of a sudden the meaning of the lyrics bring you to follow the statement rather than the sounds themselves. It's like when you listen to a foreign language and you don't speak, or somebody speaks next to you, and you don't know the phoneme's meaning, you only hear the sound of the music of the words, but not their meaning. And all of a sudden you listen poetically to the language. When you understand the language, you listen to what it means, because after all it's a vehicle for thoughts, you know. And I find that very often the compositions in Debussy don't correspond in their notation to his intent. It's something that students don't always sort of think about. Most of the time you play a piece because you heard somebody play it and you like it. Oh my God, my friend played it, I so much want to play it. And then you open the score and you go, oh really? And very often there is this problem, is that the music of Debussy in this case sounds improvised on the spur of the moment, atmosphere, mood. It's not thematic material. It's not like I'm going to impose my theme. Dominance. All of a sudden you're in front of a statement. What will he do? So I'm in the thought process of the composer already. Whenever here I am, lights, feelings, it's like different senses, especially the resonance. And that is something that is not indicated in the notation, is how long you let the resonance resonate, literally.
Yeah, I had a hard time figuring that out at the beginning.
So usually the common French teacher statement is, oh, you know, Debussy is very strictly written, very rhythmically written. you say it is already that is not. Why? Because very often the notation of the music is very old-fashioned. It corresponds to how they learned to write music when they were students. But in the case of Debussy, his musical ideas are barless. There was one composer who was his closest friend, and people don't always think about, is Erik Satie. Have you heard of Erik Satie? If I play this tune, you'll probably know what it is.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
When the tune is more famous than the composer. And originally it was barless. It just stays sort of suspended in the air. And when you see the music written in 3/4 with all the bar lines, encapsulated on the score, it doesn't translate that poetry. Now there was a composer in the French Baroque called Louis Couperin in the 17th century who wrote unmeasured preludes. Now he notated only few whole notes without bar lines and without rhythmic patterns. Basically it looks like eggs on staff. And then you read the notes and you would go. So they'll do without now. And in fact, he had to improvise from these notes the piece, but he didn't impose it to you notated. But how do you know what to do when it's not notated? You used to study with him and you learned. Whenever Bach, who was one of the Baroque musicians who was the most pedagogically oriented, he wrote down everything that's supposed to be played, more like a template from which the performers improvised. Like if somebody played Bach, the first invention, at the lesson he would be very disappointed. There are letters about students of his who recalled their lessons with him where he wanted them to creatively write their own patterns. And not necessarily only, it could be, or so when we come to this situation where the notation leaves room for improvisation, the interpretation was part of the improvisation. And that's why I think that in terms of the rhythmic patterns in your piece, you should think in terms of long and short. And for instance, this is short, and this is long. Then 3 short, and then long. If you're a singer, a wind player, you would take your breath, and then you'll play as you exhale. Or you can last longer before you take breath.
Yeah.
And I find that pianists, we don't have that idea of the phrasing because there are no lyrics. In fact, we could play and you get in trouble.
Yeah.
Greatly. It's such a pleasure to have to be invited to give a class and be able to do everything that the student is not allowed to do and say, look how cool it is. The forbidden fruit. Very attractive. But in order to be more precise about what I wanted to give you as an idea, is that you have to play a lot, take in account the acoustics and the pedal of the instrument on which you play. And I think that when you started, you chose a tempo that corresponded to how you always play, or was it just how it came up on this keyboard?
It's kind of how I always do it.
It doesn't come up in a different circumstances, differently
Well, if I'm nervous, I'll go faster by accident, but I try to keep it the same.
But you hear the sound you produce from a practice room to a hall. It resonates more,
There's
no?
a big difference.
Can you give us the opening, please? All the pedals. Well, at least 2 of 3. Statement. That's right. So this first drop started here and finished here. And in the opening you have mostly thirds, right? It's very interesting to observe that the time Debussy was composing what we call impressionist piano music, which he called symbolist, because in French language, impressionist for his time meant faker.
Oh.
Which is what the reviewers did about the French painters presenting their exhibit in 1874. That's a bunch of fakers, bunch of impressionists, and they'd say, yeah, we are the impressionists, we're the fakers. But because impression also means something you receive from what you've seen, the emotion of a landscape, sunset, sunrise, is the opposite of expression. In Latin, the ex as a prefix is out, and in you receive. So impression is something you receive, and then you react either by painting it or playing it. And because they lived at the same time period, the Monet and the Debussy, people assumed that French music of the time was impressionist. But if you told Debussy, he would be offended. Just because he thought of the word in its meaning as non-professional. Is that there's one thing interestingly in common between the painters. Have you seen a lot of paintings of impressionist French painters?
I know the one that does flowers. Monet.
You mean the white lilies on the pond? Yeah. No others.
There's like the ladies on the like field, and there's like a river. It's a lot of stuff with the water and nature.
Yes. And sometimes not very focused. It seems a bit hazed or fuzzy. And very often that's a common point with the French piano music, with the pedal, the resonance creates that wah-wah-wah resonance moment, where you hear more the resonance than the attack of the notes. So it sounds very aquatic in a way, watery. And Brahms, who was an old gentleman in Vienna, was writing almost at the same time his last opus 119 intermezzo opening. Which strangely sounds almost impressionistic in the beginning, with the thirds in resonance, almost like. But between Brahms and Debussy, it couldn't be more contrasting. As a matter of fact, Claude Achille, that was Debussy's first 2 names, arrived in Brahms's apartment, and the door opened, and it was his lady was taking care of his apartment. So he hands her a business card that says Claude de France, not even Debussy. And he requested an appointment with her, Dr. Professor Brahms, and she came back to tell him after she presented the card to him that he cannot receive you because he sees on the card that you're a French composer and he doesn't know of such thing. And this controversy was fueled by the 1870 war, 1914 war, until World War II. And the Brahms symphonies were played in France for the first time after World War II. This ridiculous, but for us ridiculous, for them very patriotic fight over the musical heritage of the country.
Yeah.
And so Debussy composed this piece, and the idea is that the title gives you the mood of the colors that you will use, right? Like a music painter or a sculptor. Would you say sunset, early evening with the moon arriving over the glare, very, very, very little light, very dim, like a...
I think about like a lake at night, and then
the mirror of the lake?
Yeah, because like you were saying, I think there's parts that sound very water, especially like that, and then that reminded me of like a body of water.
And in music and instruments, which one does it remind you of? Yes! Bravo! Oh, I love when the answer comes in precisely. During the late years of the 19th century, there were two French makers of pianos, Clair and Erard. And they both wanted to reintroduce the harp in the contemporary music of the time, since it was basically music from ancient Greece and all, from 1,000 years before. And so Erard went on with a chromatic harp that has strings for each note, and Pleyel with the pedal harp that has C major strings, and with the pedal you make them sharps. And so the two companies were competing. Debussy was commissioned to write Danse exotique for the Erard, and Ravel Introduction and Allegro for the Pleyel. And I must say that combine that with the fact that all the French composers of the time, Fauré and Franck, and like them, were all organists. In the Paris Conservatoire, if you were a student in composition, the mandatory instrument was organ.
That's so odd, yeah.
Not the piano. So the polyphony prevailed. And also because most of them became unsuccessful composers, since you cannot have successful hundreds of composers getting commissions, all of them, they all got jobs as church organists. But meanwhile, you combine this with the resurgence of the harp, and Debussy introduced the harp in Péléas and Mélisan's opera for the orchestra. Ravel in the concerto in G uses a harp which no other composer for piano concerto used, and he has even a solo harp in the concerto.
Yeah.
And so the combination of the organ in their basic training and the harp as the revamped instrument of the time combined, I find in the composing texture, or in the soundscapes of their imagination, was sort of like an organ harp. The organ holds the sounds without decay compared to the piano, and the harp plucks very fast notes, and they sort of disappear like perfumes that basically evaporate as soon as heard or smelled. So you have this combination of no dampers, all with holding the pedal of the piano to obtain that effect. And when you play the last note with the arpeggio in both hands, this, I would suggest to play it harp style, bottom up, one after the other, and not together. But
I like it more like that too.
Like you see, like on the harp, you would do
Yeah.
and not, though it doesn't say it per se. In the notation, when the composer wants that, they should have the noodles uninterrupted all the way up. You know noodles, the little ziggy ziggy wiggy?
I'm really glad you said that because I was doing it like that and then my teacher changed it, so.
Well, because most of the notations, this is correct, to be played like this when it's interrupted noodle.
Yeah.
And it should be all through the two staves. That's why it's right to say that. But at the same time, you can say, but it really sounds to me like a harp. I want it to sound like a
That's
harp.
what I said. I was like, it sounds better. You didn't like it.
And that's why I was telling you there is a discrepancy between notation and intent.
Yeah.
So between the Baroque, when they expected you to improvise the whole piece out of few notes, and here where they give you a lot of the notes, but then still, once they choose not to rhythmize the arpeggiation, they say, you know, do as you like. And you did, and that was very nice. He wasn't wrong. He was actually right. I just think that it might be nicer to combine the continuity of it as if you continue in the D flat major is also the key of the Sixth Nocturne by Fauré, which has in its middle section something very similar to Debussy's. To me, all these instruments combined sound to me like this kind of harp, organ, piano, resonance instrument.
Yeah.
Take that also in account that the top register on the pianos of the French manufacturers of the time didn't have dampers on the top. So when you play, if you play it without the pushing the pedal on the modern piano, it sounds very dry.
Yeah.
So you have to put some wet pedal to wet it before you drown it. But on the French pianos, it was naturally resonant because there was no dampers there in the high register.
Why did they do that?
Because the top of it was written for the texture of the thin tones, resonant like harp. So you have very often there are pages. Right, also has sometimes arpeggios now, but that was more like imitation of guitar or something. But in any case, your approach, your teaching, and your performance were absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much.
And I think that everybody can give you their opinion and say, oh, I like it this way. Oh, it's supposed to be this way. Not supposed to be that way. It's too fast, too slow, too much rubato, not enough. You don't count enough. The pedal is not on the beat, after the beat, before the beat, between the beat.
Yeah.
And the student comes out of the lesson going, how will I remember all this? Especially when you have to change a pedal and you have residues of the preceding resonance. And then, oh my God, it's messy. And if I clean it, it's hospital floor. And then comes the question when I said earlier to you, play all the pedals when you were going to start the beginning. That was the two that they had.
Yeah. Oh,
They didn't have the middle pedal.
I've never used the middle pedal.
Neither did they.
Yeah.
But they didn't because they didn't have it. And we don't do it because we think because they didn't, then we don't need to. But I was very much a defender of the usage of it when I was a younger pianist. Because I thought it can give a certain clarity to the combinations of resonances without to get blurry.
Right.
And every time I have heard the results, I was disappointed.
With the
Yeah.
middle pedal?
Middle, yeah. I mean, you compartment better.
Yeah.
But in fact, and I remember asking my teacher, Mademoiselle Boulanger, about it, because she had a middle pedal on hers. And I was playing the 13th Nocturne by Fauré, which has an impossible section to play with two pedals. But that's what it was written for. Of course, Fauré was deaf by that time, like Beethoven, late in his music. So you could say that he imagined it in unrealistic ways, because just the thought. Yeah, he's like this. Resonant, brassy sounding whole notes.
Yeah.
But then he has and I remember telling my teacher, why don't we do? And then
That sounds good to me.
and clearer. But because he didn't have it, then with the right foot pedal is. So then she said, oh yes, but you have to play it so thin. So then you have to go. It's in the background. No matter which way you try, you don't find a solution. Because I think it's not written for piano. It's written through the piano to create these atmospheres where you hear instrumentally things like harp organ and who knows what else. But generally, it's not meant to be, that's why the acoustics matter a lot, to be very clear in the statement.
Yeah, I've noticed that it depends a lot on the room I'm playing it in, like how it sounds, and
that's why I spoke to you about the, yeah, you're right, you're very bright, Yule. About the acoustics, about the resonance, about the acoustics of the place. How often do you practice in a concert hall?
I recorded here.
Good.
For a competition, but that's the only time I've played this one here.
So you practice every day 8 hours here?
No. I practice at my house, and then like if I have to record something, I'll come and practice at the place I'm recording first, and then I'm recording.
And your house is a concert hall?
Not quite. Super close, but like not.
Now, what I'm trying to say is that understandably so, we add to that, to the mix, the recordings you listen to, which are all resonated and added reverberation as if they're recorded in Grand Central Station. Which is very much of a problem, because then the student who plays on a practice piano in a practice room size place room hears things that you don't hear in reality, or get blurred by the acoustic itself, regardless of the pedal.
Yeah.
There's one good rule about the pedal of the right foot, is that you play it after the beat, never on the beat. Which means you have to hold with the fingers the preceding harmony so you don't have a gap.
Yeah.
And typically, when you have something like, if you hold the D, F, and you change, so this stayed by the finger pedal. But if you do, and to avoid that, then you hold it over. So the problem is that nobody can define it right or wrong, but the question is how much you voice and bring out the melodic line. I noticed that for the length, you have all these violet light colors. I mean, purple.
Purple's my favorite color.
That's why you want it to be the notes that hold, right?
Yeah, into the next measure.
By the finger or by the pedal?
By the finger.
And
it's
the pedal?
supposed to like,
or change pedal and you still finger holding?
no, that one. Yeah. So like, and then. Like that.
And when you do this beautifully again, can you play the top note a little louder? more in the background. So how I practice voicing is the cushion of the tip of the finger pushes very deep and fast and stays intensely deep in the key for the top part. And the bottom part barely holds and sort of glides on the notes. I do it purposely without pedal so you can hear the difference in legato and staccato. And when you put the pedal, you have a difference of texture. One is porous, one is more dense. In an orchestration, you can have oboe, flute, clarinet, you can have timbres, colors of instruments. On the piano is shadows and lights. You have no other choice. And so therefore you have to make sometimes calculated effect choice to do. You might not like it, because you might find that it's very directive by the performer. Listen to my melody. It's more democratic if I say, listen to what you want. And I offer them all to you. Why not listen? Or in other words, we as a performer, we bring alive the scroll or the paper, and somehow our choices what to bring out or what to bring less, and they don't have to be always the same because you can change mind. Nevertheless, have to be more like a landscape painted with a frame. So all of the landscape is within the frame, nothing is outside. And you want to immediately say by your touch that I intend to make you follow what I think is important to follow. Imagine if it's a film and the camera starts on your eyes. And then it takes half of the page to zoom off. And we'll see finally your face. Or you're in a theater play and you sit on the 10th row and you watch the plant next to the actor who is doing a monologue. And you don't watch the eyes of the actor, just the words. All of a sudden in the film version, you're driven by the fact that you have no other option than to follow what the director wants you to see. Whenever in the theater, live theater, you don't have, by essence, to follow only the person who talks or speaks or presents something. So in a way, you can have an interpretation that is less directive, when it's less voiced, which is so atmospheric.
I think that's more.
It's like, I don't know, everything is so special. Nothing is more special or less. And if you arrive and you go, already it's a little bit more with a personal statement. I shed light on this and not on the other. I don't believe that the solution is in the one or the other. I think the solution is in a combination of the two. And that comes with, of course, living with the piece for a long time. This has been a month?
Maybe I have 2 months.
Unfortunately for me, it's been almost 60 years. But it seems equally fresh.
Wow, and I get tired of pieces after like a week.
Imagine? But you get tired of pieces because you play them. Imagine you teach them, you record them, you speak about them, you write a paper about them, you present a conference about them. All of a sudden, different aspects come to mind. When you play it after that, you go, oh, I want to bring out this. Oh, I didn't notice about that. Oh, this could be another thing. Oh, why did I not do that earlier? Why did I take this tempo? Oh, let me record it again. And in fact, that's the beauty of it, is that it's not frozen in time. It evolves with you.
Yeah.
And it's a good travel companion. You know, like, I remember you when we were together in 3rd grade. And now we are grandparents. But I still, the flames in your eyes, you have the same, you know. And I find that the music remains always young, but the performers age. It's a very strange thing. And when I was young, I was surrounded by ultra old teachers. Since I was 7 and my teacher was 84.
Wow.
So that was like a gap.
Yeah.
Believe me, I'm in a jet lag since her death in my life. Because in fact, you come to a point where you perceive the music from a point of view of somebody who already has an experience of it that is so different from your first impression.
Yeah.
And you cannot force it upon somebody else. He has to, little by little, it takes its own space. Have you heard this orchestrated?
I had to orchestrate it for a music theory assignment.
Wow,
But
bravo!
it didn't turn out very well. I did it with like,
What did you use? Harp?
no.
No.
We had to do 5 wind instruments.
Good. Flute?
I did flute, bassoon,
Bassoon?
oboe,
Clarinet? And?
French horn.
French horn.
Was it? Yeah.
Wow, congratulations. Did you hear it?
Yeah. It did not sound great. But I did get an A on the project.
Well, then everything is wonderful.
Yeah.
What you played, from what you said, from what you felt, and from what you brought us to share with us today of your love for this piece, I only can see the brightest future for you in music.
Thank you so much.
Please continue to enjoy it like you do. It's very inspirational shared experience.
Thank you.